Hi guys, and welcome to this month's edition of the UK Zoopla House Price Report. This is where we run through everything from the growth that's taken place over the last 12 months, but importantly, what's been happening over the last 1 month in regards to the mini budget, mortgage rates, demand for property, any fall-throughs, reductions in prices, increase in prices, the whole lot. So look, without further ado, let's dive in. So first thing, as you can see on the screen now, is you've got here the current house price growth is still 8.1% increase. Now that's important because many people thought that the house prices were going to dip dramatically, reduce dramatically, and it just hasn't happened. Now we're going to come on in a bit to what we think is going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months. But in regards to the short term, you're just simply not going to see it. Why? Well, the reality is that most people can still afford their mortgages. If they're in a fixed rate mortgage for 2, 5 years, however long it may be, we're not actually going to see any pain from those mortgages until they come out of their fixed rate mortgage and go into obviously what we know now as the variable rates. But in terms of what we can see here is you've got still so far 8.1% increase in current house price growth. Now this is key actually, this is pretty important, this figure here. You've got minus 33% hit to new buy demand in the wake of the mini budget. Now that's what essentially happened is people just, a bit like when COVID took place in March 2020, they heard the mini budget, and no more than 4 or 5 days later we had issues with exchange rates, we had issues with mortgage rates, so people just stop. They simply put everything on hold, they don't do anything, and they stop looking. So this is why new buyer demand decreased so dramatically. Now, ironically, because everything started to settle down now, we've got a new Prime Minister in a short space of time, I do actually think that when we see the next report, that would have actually increased dramatically, so new buyer demand would have gone up. But again, it's only going to have gone up because we've seen such a big fall in the end of October. And this is key as well. You've got 48% here. This is the proportion of buyers using cash or small mortgages to buy homes. So this is people where they've got a surplus of money. They don't need that full 90% mortgage for residential or buy-to-lets. They don't need that full 75% loan to value. So what they're doing is they're putting more cash into it and using a small mortgage. So they're not going to be affected. They're not going to have negative equity. So if we look at the executive summary here, we've got a spike in 2 and 5 year mortgage rates, which we are fully aware of what happened. That hit demand. And the demand is down a third since the mini budget. However, sales are still being agreed at a slower rate, yes, but they are still coming through from cash buyers and those with cheap loans. And there's still a pipeline of nearly 293,000 sales at the moment that's in progress across the UK. Now, of course, we are seeing some fall-throughs because of what's happened. Some people just simply haven't been able to get the loan, or they thought they could afford it at 3% and they can't afford it at 5 or 6%. So what we're noticing now is that a handful of fall-throughs are taking place, but we've still got a real healthy pipeline in the UK sales. Importantly as well, no signs of any impact on pricing expected in Q4. Now, this obviously needs a bit of explanation. The reason why, as I said at the beginning, is typically 3 main reasons why house prices rise or fall. Is either legislation, taxation, or interest rates, and hence the impact on mortgage rates. And of course that can lead on to liquidity from banks as well. But when we have issues with legislation, whether they sort of changed the rules on what they did in buy-to-let a number of years ago, 5, 6 years ago, they turned around and said, well, you're going to be taxed on your gross amount. Well, of course that changes things in the property market. People start buying in their company names. When we saw changes on taxation, when just after COVID we saw a change on the stamp duty holiday, again we had a dramatic push in the property market, and of course the house prices rocketed up sort of 15 to 18% in some areas. So that's how taxation can affect it. And of course liquidity and interest rates can affect it. If interest rates are low, people can get cheap mortgages, therefore they can afford more. If interest rates are high, like we've seen a big increase over the last sort of month or so, but for longer term, over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, we've seen people go from paying sort of 2.5% in residential mortgages up to sort of 5-6%. That affects your loan to value, it affects what you're paying back. And this is key actually, because a lot of people think, well, what I pay for my house is the price of it. But that's actually incorrect. If you've got a £200,000 house, let's go round figures, you've got a £200,000 house, many people say, well, that house has cost me $200,000. It's not. It's actually cost you what you've paid back over your term of your mortgage. So if you look at your initial documentation from your mortgage, it would say, well, you're borrowing X amount of money, and your total repayment over that term is, for example, $450,000. So therefore, your $450,000 plus the deposit that you've put down is actually what you've actually paid for that house. So let's say you put down a £50,000 deposit, your repayment is £450,000, that's what you've paid. Whereas now people might still be buying the same property, but their repayment is a lot higher, and they might be paying back £600,000 for that property plus the £50,000 down. So although people think, well, actually it's £200,000 property, it's not. It's actually the whole thing that you're paying back over the term with your mortgage. But we don't expect to see any pain at the moment because, as I say, people are still in those fixed rates. Or if they are signing up again, they're making sure the affordability is there, or importantly as well, people are getting more cheaper loans, or they're paying in cash. But I do expect to see a change over the next 12 to 18 months, depending on mortgage rates. So if we start to see mortgage rates have that stability at 5-6%, I do expect a bit of a pullback in the market. If we start to see interest rates come back because inflation has been curbed, and we see the cost of living come down, then I do expect the interest rates to come down, and therefore mortgages come down, and we can start to see an actual price change, not in a negative way. We'll probably see in the region of roughly 1 to 2% increase over 2023. But it all depends on what's going to happen in the mortgage market. And as I say, you're not going to see any changes for the next 3 months. You're looking at least 12 to 18 months away to see anything, any kind of changes at all. And even now, we don't know what they're going to be. It really does all depend on those interest rates. So look, as we head back down into the report, we can see the outlook for 2023, as we said here, depends largely on the trajectory for mortgage rates. If we do see a sustained 6% mortgage rate, which I don't think we're going to see, it's going to lead to double-digit price falls. So roughly 10-12% price falls. But that's actually only what they went up by in the pandemic. So we're not actually seeing 3, 4, 5 years of dip, gains wiped out. We're actually only seeing the last 18 months worth of gains wiped out. However, the most likely outcome is a fall of mortgage rates towards the 4% mark, so we're getting back down to normality, and therefore a modest decline in house prices of up to 5%. But notice here, up to 5%. I personally think that what's going to happen is we will see a fall in the mortgage rates. I think we'll come back to some form of normality. I don't think we're going to get back to those late 1s and early 2% marks, but I do think sort of 3 to 4% is kind of where we're going to be in the mortgage rates. I think how that's going to impact things are people are going to have stress testing up to probably 8% rather than up to 6 or 7%, which they have been. And I think that we're going to have a bit of a static year, probably 1 to 2% increase, because there is still a demand. And what we are seeing now is where people had the fashions to go and get space during COVID, we're now seeing people actually come back into the city centres because, you know, the reality is they need to be back where things are happening. The job market is coffee shops, bars, and I say we said that 18 months ago that this is what's going to happen, and we're now seeing it come to fruition. So I do still expect 2023 to have a growth year, but nowhere near the kind of growth that we've had. But of course, what we say to everyone is you're growing it on your leveraged amount. If you have £50,000 and you leverage 150,000, well, you're growing on the whole 200,000, not just the 50. And your income again is on the whole 200,000, not just your 50. So that's why the property market, in our opinion, makes such a better difference in regards to what else is out there, because you can leverage the money, which you can't do as a ordinary retail investor in stock, shares, and bonds, and every other asset that's out there. Again, this is key as well. You've got a robust labour market. Scarcity of supply is going to support the pricing. We do know that Southern England is going to feel the greatest impact, as you've got here. We know that, that's the reality of it. Hence why we're still pushing for the north, whether that be Manchester, Liverpool's, Birmingham's, Sheffield, Leeds. All of those areas are still outperforming the south, so we're still pushing those areas. So look, just recapping in a bit more detailed sense here, we've got the political turmoil that we know. The reality is that the mini budget caused chaos. Why? It probably wasn't what she did, it was probably the way it was done. The reality is if you actually have two government agencies, or a government agency in terms of the government, but you also got the Bank of England pulling in different directions, it's not going to work. So you've got the Bank of England saying that they're going to increase interest rates to curb inflation, therefore take money out of people's pockets, and you've got the government saying we want to put money into your pockets. It just doesn't work. However, as I said on previous videos, the Bank of England did refrain from actually having an emergency rate hike, which I thought was very sensible, and also thought that probably showed their colours in terms of they don't want to push it up too dramatically because they know it's going to have a wider effect on the economy. So what did they do? They left it where it was. We're probably going to see a slight rise in November in terms of the interest rates over the next sort of couple of weeks or so. But as I say, all in all, I feel that the mortgage rates are going to start to ease back because now we've got a new Chancellor, a new Prime Minister, and the markets are a lot keener on these two than they were the previous two. And we've seen it in the exchange rates as well, whereas previously we saw the dollar rate, pound to dollar, go down to 1.04, we're now back to 1.15 or 1.16, give or take. So I think that the political turmoil is behind us, and I think we should start to see a bit of stability coming back. As we see here, the uncertainty has squeezed out new buyers. As we said previously, the 33% dip in terms of buyers coming on board, has just simply been the uncertainty. They just stop. People don't say, oh, I'll keep looking. They just stop looking and stop bidding altogether because they don't know what direction it's going to go in. So the uncertainty has squeezed out new buyers. But now we're back, and it's only taken a month, but now we're back in some more certain times. I do feel that when we do this report next month, you're going to see a nice jump in that impact. And rather than a 33% fall, you're probably looking at a 20 to 25% rise in actually how many people are starting to look again. But what we've got here is you've got a dwindling pool of buyers with cheap mortgages. So all of those buyers that we had 3-6 months ago, and they had late ones and early twos, those days have gone. So the reality is we're now seeing people having to afford 4, 5, 6% interest rates. Most people won't sign up to a 6; they'll just wait. Hence why we're seeing the dip in demand. But this key as well. We've got 293 sales in the pipeline, and we're still on track for 1.3 million sales in 2022, which is a huge amount. And way above average. Let's say we saw a huge amount last year, great amount this year, but we are still way above average. But like we said here, we're not going to see any pricing impact in Q4. And the main reason being is because people have taken out longer mortgages, and we're not going to see that impact for another 12 to 18 months. So anyone that's waiting to buy from an investment perspective and saying I'm going to wait 3 months, there's no point. You're not going to see any change. You've got to wait 12 to 18 months to see any impact, and the reality is you might wait 18 months, you may see a 5% dip, but then you've lost out on 10 to 15% income that you could have generated. So actually you're still down in terms of the whole cycle. And what we've seen here as well, at the time there was a circa 7% of homes for sale have seen the price reduced by greater than 5%. But it's still below 2018 levels. 2018 saw people reducing their prices. Now, bearing in mind, this is actually a reduction not on sales prices, but on actually advertising prices, so asking prices. So what people have done, if you go back to a £200,000 example, if you've got someone that wants to sell the house for £200,000, they may have actually put a £220,000 price tag on it, just in the current market to see what they'd get. And then what basically has happened is people have said, you know what, I'll pay it. So the next person goes and does the same thing. And all we're basically seeing now is people are turning around and they're saying, do you know what, I don't mind getting the 200,000. So they're actually just reducing back to what they'd have been happy to get. So although you might be seeing a lot of reductions on Rightmove and Zooplas and websites like that, the reality is it doesn't mean that house prices are falling. It just means that they're being more realistic in terms of the prices that they can get. So we're kind of just coming back to a little bit of reality. Now, we're seeing house price growth slow, but again, this a lot of people think that it's dipping. It's not. It's just the growth is slowing. So if we head, let's hold the highest one here, Wales, it was sort of 12 to 14% increase in up to March 2022, and then up to June 2022, we saw it around about the same level, and then it's kind of dipped to where we are now, September 2022, we're around about the 10% mark, 10-11%, but it's still growing 10-11%, we're just not growing 12 or 13%. So as you can see across the board here, the property prices are still growing. They're still growing dramatically. So I really wouldn't worry about crashes and dips. And as I say, like we said before, a dip, yes, a crash, no. A crash is going to wipe 5, 6, 7 years worth of growth off. We're simply not going to see that. The housing market is too strong. It's been stress tested to 6, 7% mark. So we're just not going to see those kind of 15, 20% crashes. We may have a 5% correction, but as I said before, if you're an investor, you can make that money back in growth in no time at all. But as I say, how we're going to decide and how 2023 is going to be dictated is all to do with mortgages. The reality is if we see that the mortgage rates remain high, you will see a larger correction. If we see mortgage rates come back and there's a bit more stability, there'll be a smaller correction. It's as simple as that. And if we see mortgage rates come back to more towards the 3.5% to 4% levels, there'll actually be even a small bit of growth. So everything's going to be dictated on that. And no one's got a crystal ball. We can't sit here and say what the rates are going to be. We can't sit here and determine what inflation's going to be, whether there's still going to be a Russia-Ukraine conflict. All of that is going to determine what the rates are. So it's kind of just watch this space. But as I say, we always have to look at, from an investment perspective, what is your worst case scenario? Well, worst case is we expect a maximum of 5 to 6% correction as a worst case scenario, and as I say, even that, we can outperform that with the kind of growth that the income that we're getting in the year on a traditional let, or the income that we're getting on a short-term let. We can easily outperform that. So we've got no qualms about the property market at all. We then start to head down into the spikes in mortgage rates, which we said here we're fully aware of. But this last paragraph is key here. This here, again, whereas in the late 80s and the run up to 2007, we saw big overvaluations, and of course it compounded the actual decline in the prices. It's not been evident in recent years. There's much tighter control now than there was. Years ago, you could actually self-certify. You could go in for a mortgage, you could head into the bank and self-certify what you earned, and they would give you a mortgage up to X amount of times that salary without much proof whatsoever. Whereas now, you can't self-certify anymore. You've got to have 3 or 6 months worth of bank statements. You've got to have wage slips. You've got to do stress testing. They want to know your outlay. They want to know you've got kids, your dependents, your cars, your water bill, gas bills, heating, your internet, everything, Sky, the lot, just so they can actually say, well, how much you've got left at the end of the month. And they've been extremely strict on that, which I think has been really good. And it's meant that the property market is a lot more stable. So what we're seeing here is stress testing here that they can afford 6 to 7% mortgage rates. So most people who are in a fixed rate mortgage have already been stress tested to make sure that they can afford that 6-7% mortgage rate. So actually, if there are still issues in the mortgage market and we are still at 6-7%, then the reality is people who have come out of their fix can afford it. But because we expect it to dip back to that 3.5 to 4% mark, we don't think there's going to be any issue at all. So what we're seeing now is stress testing is increased. They're actually going up to 8%, just in case we have any prolonged issues. But again, I think that's key, and I think it's a sensible thing to do. So again, this is important here, as I say, how's it going to hit buying power? All depends on those interest rates, guys. We can't predict, as we said, but I personally think that we're still going to see some growth next year, because I really do think that the interest rates will start to come back down. So let's head down to where what's going on in the mortgage market at the moment. As we've said here, actual availability of mortgages diminished over the last sort of 4 weeks. It's now coming back to a bit of normality, but people are actually buying now with smaller amounts of mortgage. They're putting more cash down. You can see here 30% of the house prices they're buying at the moment are actually in cash. And then we've only got a small amount here, only 4% where you've got over 90% loan to value. You've got only 26% are going 75% to 90%, and the rest are all under the 75% loan to value. But as you can see here, you've got 30%, you've got your 18%, so you've got 48% there are actually between cash or under 50% loan to value. So that's people taking out smaller mortgages. And as I say, the reality is the outlook is it's all going to come back to the mortgage and people's broader motivations. And in terms of broader motivations, we are seeing people now saying actually they're looking for smaller properties. Ironically, during COVID, everyone wanted bigger properties, more space. They now want smaller properties because there's less rooms to heat. They don't have to spend more money on extra things like whether it be council tax, like we said, electric, gas bills, etc. So people are now hedging back towards city centres. Smaller properties are now becoming the in vogue properties like they have been. And as I say, that's why we always have pushed city centre properties, as that's now really what's selling. And then as we come down to what's performing, we actually saw Manchester dip, didn't we? So we saw Manchester head down last month to 7th, 8th and 9th place, and again back up it comes because people are looking for those city centre properties. So we are seeing all city centres here, the top annual price change. We've got Nottingham, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, Bournemouth, Leicester, Bristol, Sheffield, Liverpool and Portsmouth. These are the top cities where things are performing. And again, we're noticing down in the southeast, although we've got 4s in London, 7.8, this is where I think that we're going to have the biggest impact. So where we're going to see maybe 5-6% reduction next year will be down south, but I still think we've got 1-3% growth in the north without a shadow of a doubt. So all in all, guys, as I say, most people that we're speaking to at the moment, they are in that process of they want to buy an investment, but they're still in that unsure stage at the moment. But we're not like all the other YouTubers trying to grab a headline and say, look at the next crash that's happening. We just don't think it's there. Small correction, yes, if the mortgage rates come around 4 or 5%. Slightly larger correction if they're stay around 6-7%. but because of what's happening, we think they're going to start to fall back, and we think that there is still room for a small bit of growth in 2023, but of course you've still got that income to back it up as well. So look, have a lovely rest of the week and a good month, and of course hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, you'll get all the latest news from us at Flambard Williams, and you take care and have a good one. See you soon.